What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the only album by Fort Minor. Basically, this is a rap rock group and kind of an alternative rap group. It's a pretty interesting one, similar to the stuff that like Common, Kanye West, Talib Kweli, that type feel of it. But it's just kind of like it's just kind of like an alternative version of Linkin Park, I think, in a lot of ways. Mike Shinoda is the rapper on here, and Mike Shinoda is from Linkin Park, just in case you didn't know and such. This is kind of like a spin off project that he did kind of in the interim of working on Linkin Park albums and stuff. Chester Bennington did a group and put out an album called Dead by Sunrise without Mike Shinoda, and Mike Shinoda did one without Chester called Fort Minor. So this is pretty solid. This is definitely going to get a rave score on here. I definitely appreciated the feel of this. It's kind of like a nice burst of this kind of pub type music. There is some good stuff on here that this is different from a lot of stuff that was going on in rap music in 2005. This is definitely an original burst of energy here. It's different from stuff like Late Registration, The Massacre, The Carter 2, Birdman's Fast Money. It's kind of similar to Commons B, but just not quite as thought provoking. This has a little bit more edge to it, but it's still kind of within that alternative kind of range. This stuff like that, it was just pretty original, just within the context of what happened. It's not like the Games documentary or other 2005 albums. This really had like a particular edge towards it, and I do like the concept where there is like a brief song that sounds like Linkin Park, but all four of the singles on this album all four of the singles on this album had a pretty interesting vibe about them as far as they kind of went. They were just new and kind of like a breath of fresh air, and Mike Shinoda really pulled off some songwriting and good kind of creativity as far as this kind of went. So it's definitely kind of the thing about it. We'll get to this as I start to talk about it. But yeah, there were four singles on here. There were four singles on here. The first one was Petrified, and this is a pretty solid one. This is kind of more typical hip hop in a sense. It definitely is different from some of the stuff that was out in 2005. It was not really like a synthy kind of club bop, but it just kind of had like a looming kind of feel towards it. This one just had a real kind of looming and leery kind of club feel towards it. Just a very almost hollow kind of one, but it just had some good, comfortable energy. It's a very slick song. Not the typical song that I see Mike Shinoda on. I mean, he did some of this on his 2018 album, Post Dramatic, but this is just interesting, kind of get 2000s type stuff, just because Mike Shinoda is a pretty solid rapper. He does do that oftenly. He does have some good bars oftenly, so it's just interesting when he's not kind of on that rap rock edge with Linkin Park to see some of the club type bops that he would do. And on a side note, this was executive produced by Jay-Z, so this is definitely kind of the thing here. This was executive produced by Jay-Z, so he helped helm this project after they collaborated on Collision Course, the EP that dropped in 2004. So this is a good one. This definitely petrifies a nice looming club bop. Definitely has a nice feel towards it. Remember the Name is the second single, and this is pretty much the most popular song on here. It got to 600 million plays on Spotify and stuff. This has a real kind of pounding, kind of like orchestral kind of beat on here. It's pretty recognizable. You've probably heard this song by this point, especially if you go to several sports events. It's just a really nice, strong motivational cut, definitely like a training song and just a wintry kind of hollow. Remember the Name is a strong motivational cut, definitely like a training song, just something with like sports events in mind and hustle and bustle and motivation, that type of stuff. It's a pretty wintry song also. I'd definitely say this is kind of like a hollow traverse song, and just kind of has like Remember the Name is a pretty wintry and hollow kind of traverse song. I definitely see this as one to kind of go out and about, just kind of in like the biting cold, just things like that. Just real cool and kind of chilly November, December kind of day, some of those type moments. It's interesting because on this album, there's a number of kind of winter moments on here. Like I feel like Believe Me is a nice one for that. Right Now is a nice one for that. So there are some winter kind of songs on here. It just has more, like a lot of times I'll review like these albums that just have like are packed to the gills filled with like summer breezes and that type of stuff. But this actually, there are some songs in here that I'm going to get to and list that kind of have some winter bite, just kind of strolling through like the streets in like the winter weather when the trees look all scraggly and that type of stuff. So I just would have to say, Remember the Name is a nice one. It's a nice motivational training type song with some bustle about it. That's definitely a good one. Real popular song. Believe Me is the third single. Believe Me is the third single, and this is kind of like a straightforward rap song. This one's probably the most regular out of all the four singles. This is not a club song, not just kind of like a day commute kind of song. It's just a pretty makeshift kind of winter autumn. This one just kind of has like the cold weather kind of feel of it, in my opinion. It's really kind of bristly and just kind of more Just kind of more cooler type atmospheres and breezy, kind of in like a cold sense kind of feeling towards a definite autumn, October, November, December type feel. It's a hustle song. This one's definitely kind of motivated just as far as that kind of goes. It's another one, just kind of a calmer version of Remember the Name, a little bit more regular. Yeah, Believe Me is a bustling song. It's regular and it does kind of have that makeshift kind of feel. It's just very workaday, but it kind of has like a bustle about it and it's pretty presentable. This is like a most presentable type song. This is actually interesting just to kind of get some makeshift kind of rap songs because rap wasn't always doing like certain kind of blue collar makeshift throughout the 2000s. I mean, Kanye West and Common and folks like that kind of did, but it's just interesting kind of get that concept as far as some of those. This one's just Believe Me is just kind of a more makeshift and winter commute kind of song. And then Where'd You Go is the fourth single, and this is probably the biggest song on here. This one was definitely a commercial smash. This is definitely some commercial makeshift. This has a real kind of somber piano on here, really kind of like tepid and just overall kind of yeah, Where'd You Go is just a kind of tepid and more mild kind of song. It's definitely a bone chilling kind of song. It's very affable and connectable. And kind of a theme about this album is it has some real songs on here. It just has some songs on here that really have that realness kind of bite, like, hey, this is real talk, real shit, that type attitude. Just something that kind of lays down like situations as far as talking about just the factor of day-to-day life and that sort of concept. It's just kind of the situation where Where'd You Go just kind of has a song with a message, but this is definitely one that connected pretty well. I definitely like the beat on Where'd You Go. This is just really commercial makeshift. I definitely feel like this somber jam is just a pretty nice one to kind of have. It's just kind of, it was a staple of like late 2000s rap music. Definitely the most popular song for the time. I mean, Remember the Name ultimately wound up topping it in terms of sheer popularity, but Where'd You Go was definitely a highlight for a good while. It's just an overall, still one of the central, probably one of the better, probably in like the top 20, probably in like the top 50 or 75 of rap songs from like the 2000s, something like that. Just an overall highlight, one of the better songs off here. But this album is just overall good. So definitely all four of the singles are worth recommending and that type of stuff. This would have to say Skylar Grey, who goes by the name Holly Brook, back. She went by the name Holly Brook back in the 2000s, but Skylar Grey delivers a pretty excellent hook on here. Just really gives like that kind of like somber and kind of sullen kind of commercial bite. So it's just good that it's just good to kind of get that. But yeah, so to talk about there's 14 songs on this album, and I'm going to go ahead and go through these pretty quickly just to be able to talk about them. So, out of 14, there were 11 I recommend. So, the 14 songs would be Petrified, Remember the Name, Believe Me, Where'd You Go, Feel Like Home, In Stereo, High Road, Slip Out the Back, Red to Black, Right Now, and Back Home. So really an immediate highlight on here and just an overall club bop that's pretty similar to Petrified would be In Stereo. This is definitely a floss song. That's a real good song to stunt with and have those kind of flexing kind of vibes. Definitely has some club type bump on here. It's just an overall good one. It's probably one of the more glitzy beats on here. Like Mike Shinoda doesn't step up. Mike Shinoda doesn't step out entirely. He does kind of have some jivey moments, but it's just kind of kept to a relative minimum. This is a lot more of a makeshift and just kind of commercial and like a day-to-day process kind of album. There's just a lot of themes on here where it's packed to the gills. Mike Shinoda is pretty good about doing that, just kind of having varietized type feels, but In Stereo is at least one that's kind of for stepping out, like Petrified. Another one that kind of can be like a stepping out song, but this is kind of one with a more kind of alert kind of message and feels more imperative, is Slip Out the Back. Definitely one of my favorite beats on here. Just has a real gleaming and kind of creeping beats. Just a nice overall one. Has like this nice piano beats, kind of similar to like In the End by Linkin Park, but not quite as dramatic. This has that same kind of haunting, creeping piano and that type stuff. Definite good one. There's a couple pub songs on here. I feel like Red to Black is kind of like a jivey alternative rock. Red to Black is like a jivey alternative rock bop with like a pub crawl and beer mug kind of feel towards it. It's kind of one with that kind of more, yeah, I would say that Red to Black is just kind of like a foot tapper. It's just kind of one that just kind of has like a little bit decent jive about it. Just kind of a nice, good song to kind of step out and just have a few drinks to that sort of concept. Just an overall good one. It is a stepping out kind of song, but it just has a more relaxed energy compared to In Stereo and Petrified and some of those. Then I would also have to say that Back Home is another one that's kind of like that. This one's more of like a lazy evening kind of pub crawl tune. It's definitely for an evening out, but it's just a more relaxed version of Red to Black. Common is on here, and these guys called Styles of Beyond. Styles of Beyond is like an alternative rock group or an alternative rock rap group that have a bunch of features on here. They have an album that I'm eventually going to check out and some stuff like that. Mike Shinoda is pretty affiliated with them, but they're on here a bunch. And Common is on this song Back Home. It's a pretty good one. Just has like these light, lazy kind of guitar licks on there that just kind of feel like college and college kind of pubs and just pub crawl kind of music. I feel like there's a couple like haunting kind of realness factor songs I was talking about before with some of this realness kind of vibe. I feel like Home and Right Now are both similar to that. Where Right Now, yeah, Right Now is kind of like a haunting winter bite with some realness. This is definitely a winter song that just kind of has that kind of biting kind of feel. Just really kind of New York, kind of walking through the city buildings at night kind of feel towards it. It's a nice somber piano kind of feeling. Definitely some evening commute. It's just an overall nice one. Then a similar song to that is Feel Like Home. This is another one with some winter bites. Work a day, but it's not makeshift. I kind of feel like yeah, Feel Like Home is just kind of like a workaday type song. I definitely think it's just kind of typical regular day type stuff, just errands getting done, responsibilities getting done, that type stuff, but just without the kind of makeshift kind of feel towards it. It's this kind of one that kind of has some edge about it, but still kind of day to day, just in the concept where maybe you're not just solely just like so straightforward. It's just kind of one of those ones that has some edge. It's just kind of like a song that like Nas would do or Black Thought would do or someone like that, or just some of those East Coast rappers out of the 90s, some of those type folks. They're lyricists that had those kind of jazzy and more kind of evening news, kind of typical evening commute type feels where you're just getting a hot dog, that type feel, but just kind of in that concept of just a little bit edgy about it. So it's good to kind of get that. I'm trying to think of other ones that I recommend. High Road. This is another one. This is definitely High Road has John Legend on here. High Road is another kind of East Coast similarity type tune. It's definitely a bright kind of day commute kind of tune. It's very workaday and has regular vibes about it. This feels like a typical day through New York or Philadelphia or some place like that, or Massachusetts, one of those type places. Not Boston, Massachusetts, some of those type places. Just really kind of or just going by a sports game, something like that, getting a hot dog, getting like a Subway sandwich, getting something like that. Just one of those type moments as far as that kind of goes. It's very, I mean, the High Road kind of has some pep. I almost gave this song an almost song just because the concept of the message where Mike Shinoda conveys the fact of him wanting to take the high road. It is a little bit optimistic, but I do like the concept of it just kind of being like a pretty decent bop. It's one of the more regular songs on here where there's just some songs that kind of have like the more dramatic and kind of imperative feeling, like Right Now and Feel Like Home. And then there's some club bops like Petrified and In Stereo. So there's just a good assortment of moments on here as far as that kind of goes. This is a pretty varietized album. I definitely kind of yeah, this is a pretty varietized album. This has plenty of good vibes, and the good thing about it is there's at least a secondary song for every type theme that there really is. There's the pub crawling songs, there's the city traverse at not the evening city traverse songs, there's the day commute kind of songs, there's the hit singles, there's the club bops on here. There's just some somber type songs and some real type songs, also some of those realness factor where it just kind of lays it down kind of songs. So it's just a good assortment. For 2005, this is pretty outstanding. This is definitely kind of state of the art as far as that kind of goes. So I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 10 out of 10. I'll talk about some of the songs. There were only 3 songs I didn't really like, which would just be Kenji, Get Me Gone, and then Cigarettes. So Kenji, Cigarettes, and Get Me Gone were the only ones. Get Me Gone, I just didn't like the beat on that one. That one was kind of short, and it was trying to be like some sort of alternative rap type tune that just didn't pull it off as well. I really didn't like the production on Cigarettes that well either. It was kind of an awkward song and kind of an awkward topic on there. And then like Kenji was kind of a storytelling song where I did like the beat on that, but I wish it wouldn't have been just designated to just like a story type atmosphere. I mean, the thing about Mike Shinoda and Fort Minor is this had a lot of food for thought on here. It had a lot of messages to kind of convey. When people complain about the fact that rap music doesn't always have like messages and something to say, something palatable to say, this is a project that actually does. Has a number of themes on here, stuff on its mind. The club bops are kind of kept to like a relative minimum where there are some stepping out moments, but they're just not at the sheer degree where that's the central thing on Mike Shinoda's mind. It's seen. I mean, that's just kind of the concept. This is definitely like an everyday and kind of work a day regular type feel in terms of the day-to-day setting of what this album conveys. So it definitely did that. This is definitely, I always kind of wondered about this album back in the day just because this was just a different kind of context, but just seeing some of these makeshift type tunes, there weren't an overabundance of makeshift rap albums. I mean, maybe Cameron's Come Home With Me was kind of like that, but apart from like Cameron and like the occasional East Coast artist that would have some of these workaday kind of blue collar type tunes, this is not very, didn't happen terribly often late. This was definitely, this album is not much of a weekend album. I mean, it has a couple bops for that, but it's more kind of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday type music with like the afterthought of Thursday, Friday, Saturday in mind. That's just kind of the concept. Maybe you're getting a hot dog as like a recreational type extra thing to do, or a Subway sandwich, but for the most part, this is kind of like has an East Coast tinge with like the concept of this like day-to-day commute. So that's this kind of thing. But it is, yeah, like I said, this album gets a 10 out of 10. The social score, though, I will give a 7. I mean, it does have 4 hit singles that did pretty excellently, and it does have a good variety. But like I said, it's just not a very kind of exuberantly recreational type feel. Most of the lyricists that show up on here are more East Coast and more thought-provoking type dudes. So it needed probably someone like Cameron or Lil Wayne or like someone like that, Joel Santana, or just other folks like that that could have hopped on these records and done something. I just would definitely have to say so. 7 social. In terms of the future, like Fort Minor has been kind of braked. I mean, they've kind of not done anything. Mike Shinoda was kind of putting out songs. He has done music and done solo music, but Fort Minor has kind of just not really happened. There are other projects. They did drop a couple mixtapes that I'm going to check out, and I also want to check out like Styles of Beyond and see what they're about. But that's basically the concept. This is an excellent album. Like I said, once again, I gave this album a 10 out of 10, so it's worth investing in. Just understand that it's not the sheer recreational burst that you might be looking for, but it is excellent beyond that.